I would like to call this hearing for the Subcommittee on Federal Impacts to order. It is November 24th, and today we'll be talking about energy. To give us just a bit of housekeeping before we start, if members have questions, again, if you can wait until the end of that presenter, but then anytime in there, you can just raise your hand and I'll call on you in the order that you raised your hand. I will try to keep that straight. Once you are called on, if you can make sure your camera is turned on. And other than that, if folks have questions, you can let me or Rachel know, and we're happy to help you out. I would like to welcome Chair Frentz to the meeting today. The Senate Energy Chair has joined us, and we appreciate his interest in this campaign and his work on this issue as well. Thank you for joining us, Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Glad to be here. Good morning, everybody.
Members, to just set the stage for today, on October 1st, the first day of the federal government shutdown, the Office of Management and Budget announced that it was rescinding a massive amount of federal investments in clean energy projects. As expected with this administration, the announcement was partisan, immature, and came on social media. Quote, nearly $8 billion in green new scam funding to fuel the left's climate agenda is being canceled, unquote. OMB Director Russ Vought tweeted. Then he listed the states, including Minnesota, where projects were being canceled. These 16 states have something in common. They voted against Donald Trump in 2024, every single one of them. This year, the Trump administration has terminated $644 million in energy projects around the state of Minnesota. Cutting infrastructure projects because they're in states that did not vote for you is no way to govern. Neither is defunding an entire industry just because its leaders don't donate to your campaigns, and the federal bills to support it were signed by someone who beat you in an election. As we go through today, you will notice that we do not have testifiers with us from the industry, and that is not because those voices weren't invited. The fear of retribution by this administration is real and goes beyond cities and states and down to individuals. The 100% by 2040 package is a generational pledge to get the Minnesota electric grid off fossil fuels and to do it as soon as possible in the safest and most responsible way. That's only possible with a faithful federal partner to support the transition to clean energy. In Donald Trump and Russ Vought and Chris Wright, who is temporarily pausing his career as an oil man to run the Department of Energy, we do not have a federal partner. We have opposition. What's at stake? What is threatened is consumers' ability to pay for their heating bills, our community's ability to build the infrastructure we need for reliable, modernized energy systems, and our state's ability to prepare for and fight against climate change before it's too late. We'll go to our first testifier today. Really pleased to have the Department of Commerce with us today, Deputy Commissioner Pete Wyckoff. Please unmute yourself, and thank you so much for joining us today on the committee, and you can begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Chair Port. Thank you to the committee. As was just said, I'm Pete Wyckoff. I'm Deputy Commissioner of Commerce. I run the Energy Division. And the first thing I'll ask is, can you all see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Surprisingly good for a Monday morning. All right. Just to pick up on what you just said there, Chair Port, at the beginning of the federal shutdown, the Department of Energy announced nearly $8 billion in grants they wish to cut. Of those grants, 318 of the 323 were in states that have Democratic governors. And the thing I will point out is there are very analogous or very nearly identical states are grants in states with Republican governors that did not get cut. The thing that makes this a little more convoluted is even though there was a large grant to the state of Minnesota on that cut list, that grant has not actually been cut. So we are still hopeful and waiting. That was the grant to build new lines between Minnesota and other states in the MISO region to the west to unlock energy from the Southwest Power Pool region. So that grant is still out there, and I need to to make sure people realize that that has not been cut. One of the themes of what does actually get cut is we're having a pretty good job of defending ourselves against cuts at the state enterprise level in Minnesota, thanks to the work of the Attorney General's office. Things that are to universities or towns or tribes or non-governmental organizations tend to get cut with no recourse. So that is not so good. All right, let's get into the presentation. I'm going to talk not that long, but I do have longer than usual portion of time today in 4 parts. I'm going to talk about projected changes to utility bills and the energy sector as a result of mostly the passage of HR 1 or the One Big Beautiful Bill this summer. Then I'll talk about some more specific federal funding implications for Minnesota. I'll talk about potential effects on Minnesota's 100% clean energy goal. And then I'm going to move to an update on something that's very timely, which is LIHEAP or low income energy assistance. We just call it energy assistance in Minnesota, which had been held up by the federal shutdown. We are hoping that will resume and we will get our money very shortly since the federal shutdown is gone. All right, it's hard to know exactly what the impact of HR 1 will be on the electric sector and the energy sector. And despite the title here, this is just for the electric sector, these numbers. But we do depend on models. And there have been a few national models that have been downscaled to include Minnesota. And they show in the near term expected increases just because of that bill, not because of other forces that are moving electric prices up and down, of fairly dramatic fashion in the north central region of the United States, where we are, expected by 2029, because of that bill, 12% plus increase in electric utility rates. Minnesota does a little better than the regional average in that model, and that gives us 10% by 2029 as a prediction. That doesn't mean that's what is actually going to come to pass, but that is, all other things being equal, what the model would show. As we move farther out, it becomes a little fuzzier about how exactly the steps taken in HR 1 will impact rates, but they will be inflationary by any measure. Estimates range from 25 to 42% electric rate increases in this state by 2035, all other things being equal. There are other forces that can push electric prices down. Some other forces will push it up, but just from the driver of this bill, that's what you would expect. HR 1 will have other impacts, particularly on the jobs in the manufacturing and energy sector, leading to an estimated loss of 760,000 jobs nationwide by 2030, and putting $500 billion in investment in the United States at risk. The estimate for Minnesota is that this will cost about 14,400 jobs in the energy sector by 2030. Across Minnesota, new solar and wind projects currently planned are going to be built. There may be some that are lost, but the build out is mostly driven by 2440 law, but it will cost ratepayers more. These tax credits, which I'll get to in a second, that had been in place for wind and solar, reduced the cost of wind and solar by 30 to 40%. with the federal government not picking up that tab, it will fall on ratepayers. But here's the kicker. We still need to build for so many different reasons, including increased electric demand, new generation in this state, and wind and solar, even without the tax credits, will be the cheapest way to build. So that is still what we will build. The cost estimates for just Excel, Minnesota Power, and Otter Tail Power for projects that they were going to do after and already have approved in their IRPs after the tax credits expire would be $7 billion that will be transferred to Minnesota ratepayers. Now, we are working hard to move some of those projects earlier, so that might not be the full $7 billion, but that's our initial estimate. That doesn't include co-ops and municipal utilities, so the true number for the state will be higher. Federal funding impacts, just to expand a little more, the clean energy tax credits are the big deal. The terminated credits from wind and solar will, in a complex phase out, be completely gone in 2 years. It also introduces new restrictions over those 2 years that we still don't know how severe they're going to be based on foreign entity of concern restrictions in the legislation. But again, wind and solar will remain the best existing technologies to add electricity to the grid and meet a rising electricity demand, including for data centers. I'll put it even starker. They're the only way to add to the grid. There is a huge supply chain problem in the gas generator industry. And if you are not already planning on building a gas plant and have not already ordered your turbines, you will not get it until the next decade. So the thing we can build this decade is wind and solar. The other effect will be pressure to needlessly extend the lifespans of expensive, outdated, and polluting coal generation. We can get into more of that, but there's a whole bunch of reasons why this is bad. But the first one I'll focus is economic. The reason coal is going away so rapidly in the United States is not because it is banned. It's because in the energy markets, coal loses to wind, solar, and gas. And they have not been making the market clearing prices in our national and regional markets, or our regional markets. So coal plants have been losing money right and left. Another thing I will mention about H.R. 1 that is going to really impact Minnesota is the revocation of the clean hydrogen production credit, or the phase out. It will phase out after the end of 2027. This change will jeopardize a lot of things we are trying to do economically in Minnesota, such as building a SAF industry. It will indirectly affect the SAF industry. Building out an ammonia fertilizer industry, it will do that. But the one I would focus on even more is that green hydrogen is the key to producing high-value iron products in Minnesota. Historically, we have exported our iron, and it has been reacted with coal down in the other parts of the Great Lakes. It's a chemical reaction, not an energy reaction. That reaction can be replaced by hydrogen. If we did that, we could keep the industry, or build the industry in Minnesota, and move to higher value products. We'd be exporting our steel, not our ore. That would be amazing for our economy, and it's jeopardized by the changes in H.R. 1. On the individual level, Minnesota homes have been taking advantage of tax credits that are phased out rapidly by H.R. 1. At the end of this year, credits for weatherizing housing, for adding solar to housing will expire in 2023. Nearly 9,000 houses claimed the solar credit, and over 60,000 houses in Minnesota claimed the weatherization credit. That's going away at the end of this year. We don't have 2024 or 2025 numbers, but I'm sure they were actually higher. So this will hit individual households. It will raise their energy prices. Electric vehicle credits have already phased out, and they have been really important for driving the EV build out in Minnesota. Just as a sidebar, this is not from H.R. 1, but this is from executive action. the Trump administration is trying to keep uneconomical, unneeded coal plants online. One of their first test cases was a coal plant in Michigan that regulators, the utility, and regional guarantors of electric reliability had all said this coal plant is expensive. It is not needed for reliability. It should go. It was going to retire. It was kept open by an emergency order from the Trump administration. We are suing, along with other states, the basis for the emergency order. The cost was $80 million to keep this plant open in the initial run, and it's estimated that this plant will cost an additional $300 million for ratepayers per year as long as it runs. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There are a bunch of coal plants that they will try to keep open using the same mechanism, and that will cost ratepayers a tremendous amount of money. On the grant side, in response, as you mentioned, the federal government shutdown, the Trump administration announced billions in grant cuts that primarily impact Democratically leaning states. That includes cuts to Minnesota, though, as I said in the opening, some of those cuts haven't actually come through. Without these investments, Minnesota could face higher energy prices, slower infrastructure development, and increased energy burden economically on low and middle income households. I'll point out that that recent round of cuts follows many other rounds of cuts that have impacted cities, tribes, the university system, and others. Again, we have mitigated a lot of that through lawsuits at the state enterprise level, but some of those lawsuits are pending. For instance, there's a Solar for All lawsuit to the tune of $7 billion nationally in money that the Trump administration is attempting to claw back. That lawsuit's pending, and we will not get our share of that money unless we win that lawsuit. How does this impact our 2040 law? Well, first of all, we are on track and have been on track to meet all our interim targets for the 2040 law. This is going to be challenging in the face of increasing demand, particularly from data centers, but we have ways, particularly thanks to legislation passed about data center tariffs in the last legislative session, to mitigate the costs and actually use data centers if we get them as a tool for helping us build out the clean energy grid. HR 1 makes this all more expensive, but as I've said before, solar and wind will still remain the easiest to build and most cost-effective solutions for the open field running we have yet to do as we build up the renewable portion of our energy sector. And despite federal changes, we are still on track. Briefly on LIHEAP. LIHEAP, or energy assistance, was delayed by the government shutdown. And even before that, it was threatened by a Trump administration request to eliminate the program. Now, the House and the Senate don't show signs of going along with the Trump administration request there, but we're just in a continuing resolution at this stage, so we do not know the final resolution of how that program will come out for this federal fiscal year. That said, we are pleased and expecting with the end of the shutdown that we will get, under the rules of the continuing resolution, payment for the energy assistance program in line with last year. We expect that this funding will be released sometime in November. We cannot pass on any of this funding, even though we've been signing people up and there's need already, until we get that funding. Once the award letter is received and the funding comes into our accounts, Commerce should be able to start making payments to all eligible households who are signed up within one business day. We're getting ready, but we need the federal money to arrive. As of the end of last week, we have 91,000 applications that we're processing through the system. We expect that we will pay out fairly instantaneously about $23 million in bill payment assistance benefits as soon as the federal funding arrives. A couple more things. Minnesota is also partially thanks to Trump administration actions, expecting to see it to get more expensive to heat with natural gas and to generate electricity from natural gas. A lot of this is being driven by the rapid increase in liquid natural gas exports, which have the side effect of making gas something that is an international price, not just a national price. And we will expect that the side effect for Minnesotans heating their home will be increased electric or increased heating bills as the more and more of our domestic gas production shifts towards the export market. In conclusion, recent actions taken by the federal government in the past year, including enacting H.R. 1, are negatively affecting Minnesotans by putting inflationary pressure on our energy bills. These include repeal of the clean energy tax credits, failure or objecting to delivering on contracts that had been signed for energy-related grants, potential threat to funding for long-standing energy programs such as energy assistance, tariffs, which I didn't even talk about on clean energy components, and the policies that are in place to stop coal plant closures. All of these actions are expected to increase cost and may slow Minnesota's clean energy transition, but we still have state law and we still control this from the state, and we will meet our targets. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Members, do you have questions? Senator Frantz.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Dr. Wyckoff. Members, I don't have any depth to add to what Dr. Wyckoff has testified to, but I'm asking members of both parties and the people paying attention to this committee to look at some basics. This bill is going to cause Minnesotans' energy bills to go up. This is the exact opposite message that voters sent us last November and have been sending us for years. We have some options at the state level, and I hope we look at them. I'm especially concerned about the timing of the subsidies for wind and solar. So let's be clear. Those are now our lowest cost alternatives. Undermining the development of wind and solar, especially in a state like Minnesota, where we've had success deploying solar, is a mistake. It's going to make things more expensive. I think I'm going to stay away from the coal plant being forced open in another state, but I'll just add this little wrinkle. What they mean is for us to help pay for that extra expensive energy, which is not only expensive, but it's the dirtiest. And Madam Chair and members, I'm not on my soapbox this morning, just a humble country lawyer reaching you for Mankato, but climate change is costing us billions of dollars and lives. And just this week at the COP30 meetings, we saw a lack of engagement by the United States. I think that hurts us and hurts Minnesotans in our quest for energy. And just to take one example we heard from just a few days ago, the people of Jamaica who got wiped out by a climate-related storm being worse than it had to be are asking us, what are you Americans going to do about this? And I think Minnesota's been a leader in clean energy and a leader in protecting people's pocketbooks. I look forward to this committee. I look forward to the work next session and beyond. I just want to say thanks for the opportunity. Madam Chair, thanks for making this a topic. I could go on and on, but I think I'll stop.
Thank you, Senator Frantz. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question for the Deputy Commissioner. Commissioner, how much has the 100% by 2040 mandate cost Minnesota ratepayers?
Deputy Commissioner.
I don't have specific numbers on costs attributable to the transition, but I will say the pressure thus far from the law is downward. The thing that you do when you build wind and solar, especially when we take advantage of these federal tax credits we've had, is you bring online generation that is no fuel cost, and those things get dispatched and cost a heck of a lot less than coal and gas.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to follow up to the Deputy Commissioner. So Deputy Commissioner, are you telling this committee that Minnesotans' energy bills are going down and have been going down since the passage of that bill?
I am not saying that. What I'm saying is there are forces that drive energy prices up and there are forces that drive energy prices down. And the actual price is the balance of those. And the transition to clean is a deflationary force we have other costs in the system, particularly costs because of the aging distribution system in this state that are pushing up.
Senator Rasmussen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Deputy Commissioner, I'm still confused because it's my understanding that the Department of Commerce is supposed to play a role in advocating for ratepayers, yet as we've seen Minnesota's utilities come forward with rate cases, they're proposing double-digit energy increases, and this was well before any federal policy changes in Washington. And when you look at their rate cases, they are citing the cost of the mandates for more renewables, and they're saying that that's costing them more money. And we have seen it to that effect. And so I guess I'm just very disappointed that we have the Department of Commerce spending all their time analyzing things that are out of their control versus can't answer a simple question over the rate impacts that Minnesota's policy is having on ratepayers. And I guess, Madam Chair, I have another question for the Deputy Commissioner. If these renewables are so cost effective, why are you advocating for billions of dollars in taxpayer-funded subsidies if this technology is so cheap?
Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Port, and thank you, Senator Rasmussen. So there are a lot of things to unpack there. We are advocating for a rapid build out to take advantage of federal subsidies that will reduce the price even more of wind and solar. But what I am saying, and it is true, is that even without those subsidies, if you are building new generation, it is the cheapest thing to build in terms of delivering new electric supply. I'm not sure that gets to every part of what you are asking there, but that is why we are advocating, in addition to the state law, for these things in rate cases. Now, in rate cases, we are responding to and negotiate with the utilities that come in and ask for tremendous rate increases, and then it is our role and our analysts to recommend the actual rate change, and they tend to be much lower than what the utilities ask.
Senator Rasmussen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have another follow-up for the Deputy Commissioner because to me, the math just doesn't add up here. Why is a mandate from the state of Minnesota necessary if these technologies are so affordable that that's what the market is going to go towards? Why did Democrats in the legislature and Governor Walz have to support a mandate to force the adoption of those technologies?
Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Port, and thank you, Senator Rasmussen. The mandate will focus and push forward probably some projects. The net is actually a reduction in cost. I was not here in my role when the policy went through. I am charged with implementing the policy, but what I will say is that states that have these policies are the majority of states now. The majority of folks are in either states that have, vast majority of folks are either in states or served by utilities that have these 100% pledges. And the reason that these 100% pledges have politically worked is because they align with the economic forces. So I won't go into any more detail than that.
Senator Rasmussen?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Deputy Commissioner. And I appreciate responding to my questions. And I would say, again, we're kind of understanding a little bit of the Walz administration energy policy, which is mandates and subsidies that result in higher energy costs. And that's what Minnesotans have been seeing. And if you look at the rate cases that have been put forward by Minnesota's utilities, they're asking for double-digit increases before any changes in federal law were made. And if you read the rate cases, they're saying, well, we have to build out more renewables, and we're mandated to do so. And again, I go back to this is, similar to the e-bike policy that Minnesota Democrats had, where they're going to take money from taxpayers to subsidize other taxpayers to go buy e-bikes. And at the end of the day, that doesn't make e-bikes less expensive. You're just taking from taxpayers to subsidize other people's consumer choices. And unfortunately, the policy that we've seen from the Walz administration has been to have more expensive electricity that is less reliable. And I think that's what we need to look at is we need to go and take a look at the mandates that we're putting on the electric utilities and actually make sure we're focusing on putting costs first, not just trying to subsidize the bad mistakes that Democrats have made.
Since Senator Rasmussen referenced the 2040 plan, and we do have the author of the 2040 plan, I wonder if Senator Frentz, you want to jump in there.
I do, and thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Rasmussen. I don't think you have your facts straight. Wind and solar are driving the costs down. This committee is hearing testimony regarding the federal reconciliation bill, which makes it tougher to build wind and solar. That's the mandate of this committee, and that's what's going on in this bill. As far as the 100% bill, thank you, Madam Chair. At 2023 measures, the cost of wind and solar weren't actually coming down as much as they have since then. So I know you'll join me, Senator Rasmussen, in agreeing that what Minnesotans want is the lowest cost energy they can have. And if it's clean, that's a plus. What I'm also hoping for my brothers and sisters across the aisle is to hear your plan to address climate change. We had $52 billion in just one storm this year, wiping out homeowners who had already lost their homeowners insurance in a previous storm. That's how bad it is. We have lives being lost in climate-related storms around the hemisphere. I would welcome the opportunity for my GOP brothers and sisters to tell me, what do you want to do about climate change? And Senator Rasmussen, I'm especially concerned that I don't hear the same outrage from you on this coal plant thing. They're forcing us to keep an expensive energy source open, and Minnesotans and Americans are paying for it. There is no good reason. And if you want to join me in working to lower Minnesotans' energy bills, I'm going to need your help on that one, please. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Senator Kupek.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions here on the presentation you gave there. And I will also, before I get to the questions, I will also note my neighbor to the west, North Dakota, also seeing double-digit rate increases. So clearly that is also not something that is just a Minnesota thing. We're paying in a lot of cases, for mistakes that other parts of the country have made. We are paying for rate increases for things that happen down in Texas still. So that's part of the reason we're seeing these rate increases. I want to go a couple of things. You mentioned, because this is always on my mind, sustainable aviation fuel, that the carbon credits might have an impact on sustainable aviation fuel. Could you just delve a little bit more into that? And then I have two other quick questions too, if that's okay, Madam Chair.
Deputy Commissioner.
Yeah, so one of the good things from a sustainable aviation fuel or SAF perspective is that HR 1 did not cut the direct SAF federal tax credit. But SAF, it benefits or would have benefited and may depending on how the economics come out, on a variety of tax credits, some of which are altered or canceled, one of which is the hydrogen tax credit. Hydrogen is an important additional ingredient in the chemical makeup of a lot of processes for making SAF.
Senator Kupek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secondly, on that map you had at the very beginning of your presentation, which kind of showed all the different regions, I noticed the Midwest, we sort of had the largest, potential increase compared to the rest of the country. What is about it wasn't just Minnesota, but the entire upper Midwest. What was it about the upper Midwest that we had a significantly higher rate than even the Northeast, which was at a much lower rate of, I think, 4.7?
Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Port, and thank you, Senator Kupek. So there are a variety of things that drive that, including the fact we depend on imports in this region from the Canadian energy suppliers, and that has gotten very complicated. but one of the big drivers is that's the part of the country that has the potential to add a lot of wind and solar and was planning on adding a lot of wind in particular. And by increasing the price of wind, that hits our region particularly hard.
Senator Kupek.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Deputy Commissioner, for that answer. On the last question I have is just about the gas turbines, and you had mentioned that there's a supply chain issue, and we're looking out to maybe the next decade before you could even get those parts, which is also slightly troubling. In I guess two things on that. So if you could just explain like what that supply chain issue is, and then B, do the tariffs that have been put in place, do they also impact the affordability and the ability to get those for gas turbines?
Deputy Commissioner.
So the supply chain is such that a problem that there just aren't that many turbine manufacturers who are ready to ramp up. In fact, they were going sort of full tilt. There's a lot of question about whether a temporary sort of Trump change to federal policy is actually an incentive that would be needed for someone to build a new turbine factory. You build these things based on expected return over decades, not because of a hopefully temporary change in federal policy. So that is one reason we don't expect the supply chain to adapt quickly, because I think there will be a lot of doubt globally in the makers of gas turbines about what the long-term demand is, and you need long-term demand to build a factory. To your question about tariffs, this is hitting the energy system all over. Even things made in America tend to have highly affected by tariff parts from abroad. This is why tariffs in general are going to be so inflationary in the energy system. I'll give you, for instance, the build out of the electric sector and just how old the system is means that we need a lot of transformers, and not sexy, but vital part of the electric system. There's not a single manufacturer of transformer grade steel in the US. So you have to import it. Transformers tend to be made outside the US. You have to import them. That's not about clean energy, clean electricity. That's just about electricity. There are examples like that all throughout the chain of the supply chains needed to build the components of our energy system.
Senator Kupek, any follow-up?
No, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner, very much for those answers. Appreciate it.
Senator Dibble.
Sorry about that. Just trying to manage my screen so I could turn off my microphone. I just wanted to mention a couple of things quickly that's kind of picking up on the thread of some of the conversation that we've already had. I wanted to mention in the subject of subsidies that, one person's ill-advised subsidy is another person's great idea. And I would just mention that there's probably some strong support on a bipartisan basis for the extensive level of subsidies we provide for ethanol. I don't see anyone criticizing how many ways in the public sector we support the use of ethanol fuel for a variety of applications, particularly in the transportation sector. Many years of direct subsidies and tax credits. We, of course, have the fuel standards that require a minimum amount of ethanol be blended in with our gasoline. We have volume targets of many tens of millions of gallons per year, plus extensive support for the infrastructure that goes into producing ethanol. None of that is picked up full freight by the quote-unquote free market, but that's supported by the public sector to build all of the infrastructure, as well as, of course, those who are providing the feedstocks for ethanol in the ag sector, the farmers and the like, who are supported with subsidies and other kinds of ways. Likewise, for traditional fossil fuels and oil, the United States just this year provided $36 billion in support for the oil industry. So I don't want to hear a lot of complaining about the role of subsidies. We do subsidies when we support those things which we believe are going to have a better economic outcome, an investment with a return on the dollar, or in an effort to speed up the adoption and send a market signal such that then we can launch a particular sector that's going to have that return. If we're going to be uniformly clear-eyed about the fact that subsidies are ill-advised, let's just be honest about that conversation and ban subsidies for all those things. Or let's be honest and say we're just preferring some things because they have a particular profile and a particular partisan bent. And I think we kind of buried the lead a little bit with some of the opening comments by Chair Port, in which we discovered, all of the cuts in the energy sector are coming to those sectors and those states that have disfavored and displeased our sitting authoritarian President Donald Trump. That is no way to govern. And that is a way to destroy a country and its unity and its economy. I wanted to ask Deputy Commissioner Wyckoff a question that came up earlier this year as we were first starting to learn about these cancellations. And there was some analysis done about the consequence to Minnesota jobs. There's some cancellation of some grants that were going directly to help support emerging industries and manufacturers in Minnesota, but we know that there are implications for jobs all across the energy sector by the cancellation of these grants and this federal support. Deputy Commissioner, do you have a sense of the job count, the number of Minnesotans who are either not going to be able to step into newly created jobs or are going to outright lose their jobs that they have today?
Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Port, and thank you, Senator Dibble. Unfortunately, it's really hard to keep on top of these things because grants are canceled and then we sue and then they're uncanceled. What I gave earlier are estimates that when the dust settles, how many job losses we expect, but we don't have a good tally of jobs that have been directly impacted yet. We know of some projects that have been canceled, and of course that means that the jobs that would have gone with those projects. But mostly our effort has been to make sure that these things don't get canceled. In the temporary, while we wait for these tax credits to expire, they're still here for 2 years. We may actually see a surge in sort of temporary employment in wind and solar, particularly in solar. But then we are worried about a cliff after the tax credits expire. That all being said, I would like to emphasize one thing about these grants that are getting canceled, and when it's grants that are leading to the loss of jobs. When we're talking grants here, we are talking signed, contractually obligated by the federal government grants. This is a new thing, that a signature on a contractually obligated grant would be put into question. I find this to be un-American, honestly. That is not how we operate. You have a signed contract to do something. This is why we can sue and why we're winning in the courts. That is the expected outcome. It is this administration that has changed and said, oh, by the way, we wish we hadn't signed those contracts, so we'd like to just pretend they don't exist. And that is extremely troubling.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you. Just a couple of more just quick points. The opportunity cost in terms of job loss, future job loss is just staggering. The fact that we have this potential through hydrogen research and the deployment of hydrogen as an energy, to manufacture steel in Minnesota and not just export iron and taconite pellets is just incredible. And I know for a fact that the excitement and energy level around hydrogen, green hydrogen research, the Morris campus has been championed by Republicans on the Senate floor and Democrats and the like. I think that is just absolutely a tragic lost opportunity for Minnesota. And so before we get excited about defending the roles and the actions of the Trump administration and what they're doing, let's just think about that consequence and what that means for the overall innovation economy and the shared prosperity of the state. Is being devastated by this administration and by this president. And likewise, I'm happy to hear that the transmission investments haven't been canceled. They've been threatened to be canceled. And I can tell you, I know that part of the reason why the cancellation of those transmission support, that interstate transmission, is because Republican state legislators from other states are saying, slow your roll. This is a gigantic investment that has return on the dollar that will bring our energy bills down and get us ready for the emerging energy markets that we need of the future. And I hope that they are successful in so doing. These are state legislators from Wisconsin and from the Dakotas who are Republican, who are telling the president, don't do this. This is going to have a calamitous impact on our utility bills and our energy future. And I hope that holds. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for the Deputy Commissioner. Deputy Commissioner, if you look historically in Minnesota, if you go back a couple of decades, electricity rates in Minnesota were below the national average. But if you look at the last 10, 15 years, Minnesota's electricity rates are growing at a much faster pace than the national average, oftentimes putting us in the top 10 in terms of rate increases. And we've lost that competitive advantage over the last decade. And I was wondering, Deputy Commissioner, if you could explain why that is. Why are Minnesotans' energy bills going up quicker than neighboring states and our national peers?
Deputy Commissioner.
So thank you, Chair Port, and thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Sorry, this feels weird, and it's hard to be as formal when we're not all together. I would push back against some of the premises there. The PUC keeps track of electric rates in Minnesota. I believe we are still substantially below the national average. As rates cases come in, you hear a lot about what the utilities are asking for, but that's before we get into negotiations with the Department of Commerce. We have saved ratepayers over $700 million compared to what the utilities are asking for just in the last 2 years alone, through the actions of our negotiators in the Department of Commerce. Rates are going up everywhere. They're going up because of a variety of forces. They're going up because of lack of investment in the energy system for many, many decades, and the bill is coming due. They're going up because of a changing climate and changing increase in natural disasters, which are having a huge effect on Excel and others. Not so much in this state yet, but it's coming, but are having huge effect via hurricanes and wildfires and other increasing severe weather, which leads to huge costs as we rebuild infrastructure that's knocked down by these disasters.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Deputy Commissioner. But I kind of feel like we're in a state of cost denialism, where Minnesotans have been seeing rates go up over the past few years, and we're actually being told that, well, they should be thankful that their rates aren't going up more. And the cost is actually going down while their bills are going up. And it's very clear, Madam Chair, if you look at the data, Minnesota's electricity rates are rising faster than the national average. And what used to be a competitive advantage for Minnesota is being lost. And I think it's really concerning that we can't even have the Department of Commerce acknowledge that fact, and is saying that, well, costs are going up, costs are really going down. And we've continued to see costs go up and up and up because of mandates that have been pushed by the administration here in Minnesota. And I just want to remind everyone that we are state senators, state legislators, and I guess I would appreciate a more thorough analysis from the Department of Commerce on what is driving Minnesota's electricity rates up and why we're becoming less competitive. And to Senator Kupek's point, if we look, I also represent a border community. If you look at electricity rates in North Dakota, where they have not pushed for these top-down expensive mandates, their electricity costs are much more affordable than they are on the Minnesota side of the border, and that's giving them a competitive advantage. That's why we see businesses going to the North Dakota side when they're dealing with manufacturing, agricultural inputs, and that's my concern that I hear from my constituents is that the policies from St. Paul are making Minnesota's electricity system more expensive, and I wish the Department of Commerce would at least acknowledge that there are costs to the policies.
Deputy Commissioner, can I ask a question with that, or see if maybe I'll just lay this out and see if I have this right? We are using more energy every year here in Minnesota. Is that correct?
That has actually not been, I'm sorry. Chair Fort.
No,
I guess
go
it's your
ahead.
question, so Chair Fort. That is actually not correct. Energy use has been falling because of increases in energy efficiency for a long time. There is now a switch nationally as we see things like electrification and data centers and the like driving up energy use, and it is projected that it will drive up energy use, but that is not the past. What we have seen is maybe a little increase would have been good in demand over the past few years because we've had a lot of new fixed costs on the system because we have an aging distribution system that needs to be upgraded. We have most of our costs are coming from the distribution system. Cost drivers that are pushing up are coming from the distribution system and are coming from wildfire mitigation. If you look at generation, the cost of generation is actually going down thanks to the clean energy transition. But some of these other fixed costs are going up. So that's why I keep repeating, because it's true, that our move to clean is actually a deflationary pressure. There are other pressures that are pushing the other way.
So these increases that we're seeing that we need on our electrification system and our energy system are infrastructure costs. They are building out the infrastructure that we need to be able to use this new kind of energy to move from an older energy that is no longer, as coal plants are closing down and things like that, shifting to the new energy system, the increase in electrification, which I've worked with the Commerce Department on weatherization over the last several years. That has been an incredibly useful program for us driving down energy costs because it lowers how much we need to use. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a lot you just said there, Chair Fort. So I would respond to the last thing you said, and definitely. And the thing I would repeat is because of things like what you just said with weatherization and other improvements, efficiency's actually in the recent past been increasing faster than demand. So we've been doing the same amount of stuff with less energy required. Yeah, I think the thing I will repeat again is that the costs are being driven by natural disaster mitigation. That is because of climate change. And they're being driven by upgrades to the distribution system. The distribution system is technology neutral. That's not about where your generators are out in the country. That's about how you're distributing the last few miles. So those are costs that would happen no matter what we were doing, whether we're moving to clean or not. We ran a model in a legislatively mandated report on storage where we showed that the costs would be higher if we had not pushed so hard on moving to clean.
Thank you. And one other thing I want to flag back to, which Senator Frantz said at the beginning, is my family just got our homeowners insurance bill for the year. And our homeowners insurance went up astronomically. And we didn't have a claim last year. It is just the cost of all of these natural disasters, the hailstorms that are now, almost every hailstorm is $1 billion hailstorm, that are coming through Minnesota and raising those costs. So people might not think about those as sort of climate or energy costs, but they are hitting Minnesota pocketbooks in the same way, which right now, as we are talking about all of the pressures on inflation, on energy, on higher education, all of these costs increase just feel overwhelming for a Minnesota family. Senator France?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Senator Rasmussen, I want to try to find some middle ground for us. And I see my colleagues, Senator Utke, Senator Nelson, Senator Cran on here. You know I respect you as members of the Senate. You know I like working with you. So I'm just going to toss this out and let us move on. The issue here is the federal bill, but what we're also talking about is clean energy. So just want all of us to keep in mind the top 5 states in this country for building renewable energy include 4 that are led and run entirely by Republicans: Texas, Iowa, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And those are states in which, and I mean this as a compliment, the cost of renewable energy, the cost of energy overall, is a high priority, as it should be. So I'm just asking members of this committee to consider, why is it that wind and solar and geothermal are so dominant in those states in which there is no 100% by 2040? And isn't it possible that what we're talking about here has room for agreement? Where we are in 2025, wind and solar are the lowest cost. Texas is making a fortune building these massive wind projects, and they're suited to it. In a way, Minnesota's not quite as suited to solar, and that's fine. But my point is, we should be able to come together on energy policy, agree that we want, as Paul Gazelka said on the floor, clean, reliable, and affordable energy. And if Texas, Iowa, Oklahoma, and Kansas are tops in the country at building renewable energy, is there not a bipartisan path for all of us to say, here's what Minnesota should be doing? Just throwing it out there. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Senator France. Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to loudly
Senator Nelson, is it possible for you to turn your camera on?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And just to loudly state that, yes, I'm glad to hear the acknowledgement of bipartisan support for clean, reliable, affordable energy. I think that's all what we need. And before I get into my few comments here on this area, I'd just like to note, Senator Port, we also are one of those homeowners who saw our homeowners insurance double. Can you imagine that? Double without any claims. So this is a concern, and I think this is probably a concern perhaps for another committee, as Senator Friends alluded to. This committee hearing is about the middle family tax cuts package, or HR1, or whatever you choose to call it, OB cubed, whatever the name is. But this is what this committee is about. And I want to just get to the issues, particularly that we're hearing discussed here. And there is a lot of agreement, I believe, on clean, affordable, reliable energy. But what I'm concerned about, well, first I have a question, and then maybe I'll mention a few concerns. And this is for the Deputy Commissioner. And Deputy Commissioner, just speaking about affordability, let's just zero in on that right now. Early on, we had a lot of discussions about affordability, but it was not clear to me in those discussions that subsidies were included. In other words, when you look at the cost of energy, and that's one of the things we're looking at when we are talking about affordability, how are the subsidies figured in? The subsidies are a cost. We would not be intellectually honest if we did not include the subsidies into the cost. Now, the issue on the subsidies, of course, is who pays those? Well, everybody pays those. People who have solar panels, people who cannot afford solar panels, people who drive EVs, people who cannot afford an EV. They're all paying those subsidies. But I just want to know if the cost of subsidies has been included in your discussion about the costs of energy.
Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Nelson. So a couple things there. One, to reiterate what Senator Dibble said, there are subsidies for all kinds of energy. The subsidies for fossil fuel energy is built in and permanent. The subsidies for renewable have to be renewed every once in a while, which is why they keep coming and going. That said, these are federal subsidies from federal taxpayers that are going away, even in the absence of federal subsidies. Wind and solar in a subsidy-free environment, which we won't have because fossil fuels continue to get their subsidies, are the cheapest way to add new electrons to the grid. And even with subsidized fossil fuels, an unsubsidized wind and solar is the cheapest way to add new generation to the grid. The other thing I will point out is these are federal subsidies. Minnesota, as a state, pays way more into federal taxes than we get back in federal benefits. The subsidies we take advantage of from the federal government for building out our clean energy system, in some ways, are just balancing that ledger.
Senator Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. So a long discussion on subsidies is probably overdue, but we're talking right here about subsidies for clean, affordable, reliable energy. And so we have to take that into account. The other thing I would note is that as we talk about the federal government, and again, that's kind of what this committee's jurisdiction is. I don't know that it's been noted today, but we also have to look at the environment of the federal government, which of course we all pay for. And I also understand your comment, Deputy Commissioner, about how frustrating it is that Minnesotans pay way more in taxes to the federal government than we get back. We understand that. Actually, I live in a community that does that as well at the state level. So that's just the fact of, I suppose, our government taxation system. And I'm not making any judgment on that. But what I would say we must discuss, or at least be part of the discussion today, when we're talking about federal rescissions or removing some of these energy tax credits. We would be remiss if we did not note the environment that this is taking place in. For example, let's just start with the national debt. What is it? Everybody know that? Over $38 trillion in debt. Our federal government has been spending too much money, much like the state of Minnesota, which, by the way, had an $18 billion surplus. And then as the trifecta came in without any governing holdback, it turned into a $6 billion deficit. I'm just saying it is the natural tendency of governments to spend too much money. And that's why we need to be accountable for that. And so when I hear things like the federal government reducing some or making rescissions on these subsidies for clean energy, yes, I want to see clean energy too. And what nobody on this call has a vote out in Washington, D.C. But we do, some of us here do have votes on what happens with Minnesota's energy policy. And what's really shocking is what did happen with Minnesota's energy policy. We talk about clean energy, and yet we don't allow it. This body in its current leadership voted to not allow big hydro. We will not allow hydro energy as clean energy in our state. I can't understand that. We are a state of water. We have a lot of hydro energy, and yet we can't count that as part of our clean energy. I think that's a problem. And I also can't understand why this state continues to vote against just lifting the nuclear moratorium, just so we can discuss advances in nuclear energy, which, by the way, if we're really serious about holding down energy costs, we have to look at the newer modular nuclear energy. And so I'm just kind of dismayed that we've been this long in the discussion and we're continuing to talk about what happens or doesn't happen at the federal level, when quite frankly, a lot of the things that are hitting my constituents' energy bills are decisions that were made right here at this Capitol. And I think that is frustrating to many. And I will just mention one other thing at this point, and this has to do with permitting. Currently, it used to be that local units of government, like counties, were able to do permitting on smaller transmission. My understanding is that is not the case anymore, and that has been turned over to the unelected state PUC, Public Utilities Commission. And we have several projects going right into my district where people are very concerned that the PUC is overstepping local decisions regarding permitting. So I think there's a lot of concern to go around, but I think we are remiss if we think it is just at the federal level, where quite frankly, we don't have control. But we should be looking what we can do at our state, in our state. And I just want to bring those up and bring up particularly the rescission package, and then I'm going to turn it over to the chair again. But you know, that rescission package was pretty concerning when we saw that. I wondered about that too. But then as you dig into it, I think it's a little bit more enlightening. Do you know that 26%, over 1/4 of those awards, energy related awards or dollars, were sent out in just between the election day of 2024 and January of 2025? So they were rushed out the door. And of course, in Minnesota, if there's ever a state where we should demand adequate documentation and review, it ought to be Minnesota. I mean, we are now the fraud capital, quite frankly, of the world. It's shocking, absolutely shocking. And yet we're upset that there's additional looking at awards that were sent out in just between the election and inauguration date. I want to make sure the federal government is getting adequate documentation. And I'm sure that some of these, if there is adequate documentation and review, we would like to see those continue to go out. But I don't think we in this state are in any position at all to be upset about the federal government requiring adequate documentation and review before sending out money. So, and then because some have made this political, maybe one should question why it was that 25% of the entire awards for the year were sent out post-election day, between inauguration day, and only went to blue governed states. I mean, that's the political question. So I think it's just important to kind of set the table a little more in line with what our constituents are feeling and thinking about the costs. So thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thank you for the discussion on subsidies. I appreciate that.
Commissioner, did you want to, I'm not sure there was a question in there, but did you want to respond?
No, I'm good. I also didn't
Senator
hear a
French.
question. Thank you.
I want to respond, and I want to agree with Senator Nelson. Ready? Senator Nelson, thank you for mentioning the question of nuclear. We in the Senate Energy Committee twice passed a bipartisan bill that would allow for the study of advanced nuclear. And I, for one, think that would be a positive step. I'm not proposing that we lift the moratorium tomorrow morning, but I think we should study it, and I want to agree with you on that. I also want to add my voice to those who say we have more work to do on permitting. We did make progress in clean energy permitting. I'm very proud of that bill, but we got a lot more to do. And in my neck of the woods, the example we always use, it takes 18 months to get a pork production facility permitted that they can do in 90 days in South Dakota. So as I took on some brothers and sisters in the GOP earlier in this call, I just want to say to my DFL friends, we got work to do on permitting. And thank you, Senator Nelson, for raising that issue. You have my pledge of cooperation and anything we can do to be a little bit more efficient. I'm setting aside the comments on the rescission bill for now, but I will talk to you offline, Senator Nelson. Southern Minnesotans got to stick together. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Frantz. We will, just before we move on to the consumer side, I just want to say, if we were talking about a pullback on energy costs or energy subsidizing, if we were talking about the costs cut to higher education, to housing, all of the pieces of HR 1 that took away money from Minnesota, if that money was going back in the form of tax cuts to the middle class, to the working people of Minnesota, that would be one thing. But it is projected to add $4 trillion to that debt that Senator Nelson is so worried about. And the tax cuts very, very strongly favor the richest in our country. So I'm not sure that cutting back benefits to the people of Minnesota is going to do anything to balance our national budget or to reinvest in our communities in any way. Deputy Commissioner Wyckoff, I want to thank you so much for your time with us. You were very generous with your time today and really appreciate that. We will turn our attention now to the consumer side of the impacts of these federal actions and start first with Annie Levinson-Falk. Annie, if you can turn on your camera. And you're right, Deputy Commissioner, it is harder to stay formal in this place. Ms. Levinson-Falk, if you would unmute yourself and begin your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, members. My name is Annie Levinson-Falk. I'm the Executive Director of the Citizens Utility Board of Minnesota, or CUB. CUB, if for those that aren't familiar, is a nonprofit advocate for Minnesota utility consumers. We are a resource for Minnesotans, so if you do have constituents with questions or concerns about their home energy, they're welcome to contact us. Our outreach team works individually with anyone who reaches out to us to help them understand their rights and their responsibilities and get them connected with resources that can help. And we've helped more than 25,000 people from around the state. And we also represent the consumer interest in the energy policy, both here at the legislature and also in regulatory decisions before the Public Utilities Commission. And a lot of what we do at the PUC is to advocate alongside the Department of Commerce and the Attorney General's office and others for lower rate increases and for a fair balance of interest between the regulated utility companies and Minnesotans who need to be able to afford energy service in their homes. CUB has helped save Minnesotans more than $350 million since the organization was founded in 2016. And to the earlier discussion, we absolutely agree that the rate increase requests that we're seeing from regulated utilities in Minnesota right now are unreasonable, and they're not going to be affordable for a lot of people. And we're quite concerned about that. And often the largest factor in these rate cases, it might not be the cost of new generation or grid investment, but actually the utilities' request to increase their authorized return on all those investments. So just to give an example, in Excel's current rate case, their request to increase their return would equate to about $100 million of new costs per year. So that's more than a quarter of the total rate increase request. So one of the things that our organization does is just to try to push back on that a bit and present evidence and arguments about the impact it might have on Minnesotans and what a fair return would be. So I just offer that because I think it might be of interest to committee members, but as it has to speak about the federal impacts on Minnesota consumers, Deputy Commissioner Wyckoff touched on a lot of what I was planning to say, so I think I won't go into quite as much detail as I had thought, but I wanted, before getting into that, just to give a little bit of context for what we're dealing with in Minnesota, so the context for all these federal impacts, and that is that we're seeing real concerns related to energy affordability. There's data reported by the regulated utility companies every month about disconnections, past due bills, and things like that. And utility shutoffs are at record levels. We hit a new high in 2024. Households who are behind on their bills owe nearly twice as much now as they did prior to the pandemic. Arrears went up during the pandemic and they just remain stubbornly high. So people are just having trouble climbing out of this debt. I think we're seeing the tale of two economies. The same thing that we're seeing throughout the economy. We're seeing the same type of factors in the energy sector, which is A lot of folks are able to stay current on their bills, but the folks that are having trouble are deeper in a hole now than they were prior to COVID. From the federal perspective, I want to touch on the effects of both congressional and administrative action. So from Congress, this committee is well aware of the impacts of the federal shutdown, including the delayed energy assistance. We're relieved that energy assistance has been funded and optimistic it'll be available to Minnesotans soon. Hopefully, cross your fingers, as early as the end of this month. As far as congressional actions, HR 1, as Deputy Commissioner Wyckoff discussed, was the biggest package that had the most impact on energy. It's a complex bill with a lot of different effects, but the bottom line is that overall it's expected to make electricity more expensive and to slow the expansion of power generation. It does include some favorable policies that can help put downward pressure on costs, particularly to oil, gas, and coal. And that could be one factor that's pushing costs downward, but that's projected to be outweighed by policies that are expected to drive costs up. And Commissioner Wyckoff discussed all of those. But in total, by 2035, the projections that we've looked at are forecasting an increase to the cost of electricity by somewhere between 25 to 42% for Minnesota families, businesses, and industry. Those cost increases are expected to have a knock-on effect of slowing down the pace that utility companies can build out power generation. So basically, if you have a certain amount of budget available to you, it's just not going to go as far as it previously would have as the cost of building out new generation has increased. So you're just going to have to slow down the pace. The projections that we've seen have been about a 25% reduction and new generation being built by 2035. And that's coming at a time when electricity demand is increasing considerably. And then there's projections of a corresponding loss of jobs and reduction of economic activity. To Senator Dibble's earlier question, what I've seen as forecasts just for the impacts of HR 1, not looking at, canceled grants or anything like that, is job losses of roughly 10,000 by 2030 and $1.5 billion reduction in Minnesota's GDP. So this is not modeling that CUB did, but we've tried to keep track of folks that have been modeling the impacts to Minnesota, and these are the most detailed numbers that we've seen. Outside of energy, there's a lot more in that bill, and there's other things that are going to impact Minnesota families. Minnesota families they don't look at energy in isolation. So when you look at cuts to SNAP or Medicaid, for example, those are going to affect families and family budgets. And, we know that a lot of folks are having difficulty affording home energy now, and we're worried that cuts to these non-energy programs are going to make that more difficult. At the administrative level, so there are the canceled grants that Commissioner Wyckoff spoke about, and then he also mentioned the order from the U.S. Department of Energy to keep the Campbell plant in Michigan open. So that was a coal plant that was slated for closure in May, a couple of days before it was set to completely shut down. DOE ordered that plant to remain online, and they've continued renewing that emergency order since then. The first 4 months of that cost about $80 million, and it's looking like those costs are going to be shared by ratepayers in Minnesota and across the Midwest grid region. It's very unusual for DOE to step in and overrule the planning processes that have occurred at the state level and at the regional level, and order a particular plant like this to stay online. And if it happens more, we would anticipate that it would continue to increase both the cost of electricity and emissions in our region. As I said at the outset, so the context for all of this is that there are already real energy affordability issues in Minnesota. I don't think I have to tell any of you members that. I think you're well aware. But there are also things that the legislature can do to help, and we're looking forward to working with you and your colleagues in the upcoming session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Levinson-Falk. Any members have questions at this time for Ms. Levinson-Falk? Okay, we'll move to George Shardlow. Mr. Shardlow, please introduce yourself for the record and present your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is George Shardlow, and I serve as Executive Director of the Energy Sense Coalition. For the last 30 years, ECC has advocated for low-income utility customers in the state of Minnesota before the legislature and the PUC. I also don't want to repeat previous speakers, but just very briefly, I want to underscore that we're in a moment of crisis, both here and around the country. As has been mentioned, 49 states are staring down the prospect of significant rate increases. As Ms. Levinson mentioned, we've seen significant rates of disconnection here in Minnesota, and just wanted to underscore that that sets off a domino effect. So disconnection notice is often the first in a long series of crises. It's the most common reason why people take out a payday loan, and disconnections are highly correlated with poor outcomes in health, education, and housing security. We are heartened that funding for LIHEAP was included in the continuing resolution, but again, it's largely flat funding, and flat funding in the face of rising need is effectively a cut. So we're hopeful that going forward, both state and federal policymakers can come together and remedy this crisis. And I'll just offer one addendum, which is, as we think about how we pay for not just generation, but these needed investments in transmission and distribution, and we think about whether it's the federal government, the state government, or ratepayers funding that, electric rates and gas rates are effectively a flat tax. So the folks in the lowest income census block groups are paying the same rate per kilowatt hour as the most affluent folks. And of course, we, to the best of our ability, use affordability programs to help low-income folks afford their lives. But as I would add the dimension of, as we think through, state and federal funding that might draw from, say, a progressive income tax structure that contrasts with the regressivity of rates. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shardlow. Members, any questions? Our next consumer advocate is Cheryl Hills. Welcome to the committee, Ms. Hills. If you would please introduce yourself for the record and present your testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify with you today. It's been a fascinating conversation. I am Cheryl Lee Hills. I'm the Executive Director of Region 5 Development Commission. I've served in this role for about 21 years. 5 counties in central Minnesota: Crow Wing, Cass, Morrison, Todd, Wadena. We also have the privilege of serving Camp Ripley and the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. Our role in this, and I'll share a quick little visual for you, and my role every year, no matter who is in the state or the federal positions, is to bring dollars back to our region to forward advancements in not only transportation and economic development, community development, but in climate mitigation. And we've been extremely successful and competitive at that over the years. I'm going to share this. I was asked to bring to you some local context in terms of what's been happening as far as the cutbacks. They're not all H1, but primarily most of them are definite cutbacks from as a result of that. And this is just sort of how this impacts our local communities. These are awards that were contractually obligated by the federal government. I stay out of the conversation whether those dollars should be available or not. That is above my pay grade. But since those programs are out there, we go after them. And these are for projects and programs that were locally, constituent level designed through a planning phase to say, these are the kinds of projects that we want in our communities with extensive and robust civic and community engagement. These are the few. Over 18 months, I hired an engineer friend of mine, and we applied to 41 federal grants. That is a lot. And for our representatives here who note about the reporting, extensive reporting and extensive documentation on where these dollars would be going. We were awarded $57 million, just over that, $57,633,000 for 5 counties. That's a substantial amount. We were cut from and clawed back these grants that you see before you to the tune of $40,802. Those are dollars, and some of these projects had been in existence for 2 years and still were terminated. That left a remaining, of course, which is still great, $16 million to do projects, but the impacts to the local communities, I think, is what is important to note. This is one of the grants, the one that was only from the Department of Energy, a $2.5 million grant. These are the communities that lost. The city of Motley had a solar array going on their wastewater treatment facility. Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe was working on some EV work up there. These are small projects to many, but I think the important thing is that we've done several projects like this in the past where school districts who did put solar on their properties, either on their roofs or on their properties, are saving to the tune of a minimum of $5,000 a month. That's not small change for a small school district in central Minnesota. So the savings that is coming to the school districts that's resulting in their ability to serve their students and families and taxpayers by not having to increase tax dollars even more at the local level has been significant and well documented, by the way. And I think that's one of the things I wanted to let you guys know, that there definitely is benefit to some of these programs when we bring them in, long-term benefits. I also want to note that all of these grants that are being closed out don't close without a cost. Every one of them takes staff time, a minimum of 6 months of reporting to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the numbers that we're seeing out of the federal level that says this is how much we're saving, that's not really going back to pay that debt. It isn't that solid of a number, because we still are taking dollars from those grant programs to close them out because of the fiduciary responsibility of the reporting and the auditing of the dollars that we had received. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that there's additional unintended consequences. Every single one of these projects that we have been working on have reduced greenhouse gas emissions. I think some of the ones that have hurt the most have been like refrigeration for farmers, because it was energy efficient refrigeration and they were able to do conservation. Some farmers in northern Minnesota have had to close portions of their operations because these grants that were promised were reimbursement grants. They were not upfront grants like foundations give. They spent the money and then the dollars were redacted. In some cases, not all of what they were asked for was reimbursed. Most of it was, but there were about 3 or 4 businesses that we've worked with and re-granted dollars to small businesses. Most of those were small and mid-sized. We're not able to receive their full payments. So I think there is consequences to pulling them back with a chainsaw approach versus doing it in a way that allows for those contracts that were executed with the United States government to be fulfilled. So that's, Madam Chair, Madam Port, that ends my testimony. I'm happy to take questions. I'm honored that you are listening to the fact that these cutbacks, this is more than just about our utility bills, which are going up. It is about small operations and small businesses and school districts and local units of government that are also suffering.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hills, for showing that and showing those graphics. So in those smaller programs where some of the money from a multi-year grant is clawed back, that is just then left for those small businesses to pay to carry on their own, or in the case of a school district, what happens there?
School districts are not as much impacted, Madam Chair, I'm sorry. We were able to go to philanthropy. I went to philanthropy. There are benefits of being in a position for 20 some years and working on community development. And I closed the gap for the farmers and the small businesses with philanthropy money because I couldn't bear the thought of them suffering as a result of these policy implications. I also, Madam Chair, would like to just thank our legislators, our state legislators, all of you, because if it were not for the programs at MPCA, Commerce, MDA, literally much of what we do in the rural communities that I serve would not be possible. So we are extremely grateful that at least in our state, we have awesome programs that we're able to go after. They're smaller numbers, of course, but we are grateful that we are able to serve and save money and meet the needs of people who have come together in these very small communities and decided that this is what they want. So thank you. Gratitude to all.
Thank you, Ms. Hills, and a thanks back as well. Region 5 has been a great partner to the state of Minnesota in bringing the voices of community to us so that we can make decisions that really are impactful. So we appreciate your partnership. And finally, we will go to Ron Elwood. Mr. Elwood, thank you very much for joining the committee. If you would please introduce yourself for the record and then present your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ron Elwood with Legal Aid, and it's always an honor to be asked to address a legislative commission or committee, so thanks for asking. I am last and likely least, and definitely will be very brief to hopefully give you back the rest of your day. So thank you again for inviting me here. As Ms. Levinson-Falk noted, unaffordability of energy is increasing and concerning. And as you've been debating, there are many factors that contribute to the rising energy costs. But as you've also been reading and hearing, the impacts of H.R. 1 are likely to cause electricity costs to increase. And regardless of your view on tax subsidies, the repeal of the energy tax credits contained in that bill is expected to translate into higher prices for consumers than they otherwise would be absent the passage of that bill. And unfortunately, when that happens, adverse impacts like that are always felt disproportionately by Minnesota's low-income families, of course, the families that Legal Aid represents. And the changes are anticipated to just worsen the struggle low-income Minnesotans are already facing regarding energy affordability, as you've heard. Just want you to note about affordability. Some of you may know this, but the concept of energy burden, which is the percentage of someone's income that they devote to their energy costs, according to the American Council on Energy Efficiency Economy, ACEEE, which is one of the most foremost and respected energy organizations in America. On average, low-income households spend about 15% of their income on energy bills, which is more than 3 times that of non-low-income folks. And that percentage rises to almost 20% for Minnesotans who are elderly or have disabilities. So these increases in costs are very difficult to absorb and have adverse impacts. And finally, the historically massive cuts in this bill to healthcare and food supports will further exacerbate energy burden and further jeopardize energy security for low-income Minnesotans. For low-income families, and I guess for all of us, really, the cost of one basic need affects the ability to afford others. They're just interrelated. So thus, the dramatic increase in the cost of basic needs, that is the result of the loss of the key supports that Minnesotans need, like healthcare and food, hits low-income families the hardest, and that puts even more pressure on families to pay their utility bills. So in sum, unfortunately, we anticipate that the policies enacted under H.R. 1 will have an adverse energy impact on Minnesotans, and particularly the most vulnerable among us. Thanks for the opportunity to address you today, and I'm sure I'll see you all pretty soon as session is just around the corner. And happy holidays to you all if I don't see you before. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elwood. You are never the least in any of our communities or any of our committees. Members, any questions for any of those consumer advocates or any comments folks would like to make before we close? Okay. Well, I will just say, I just want to reflect on something that really stands out to me, and Mr. Elwood brought it up there at the end. When I think about this topic, I think about how some of these decisions at the federal level are really targeting the people who need the support the most. LIHEAP benefits keep the heat on and help balance the budget for hundreds of thousands of low-income Minnesotans across every single part of our state. The Solar for All program that Trump defunded at a cost of $62 million to Minnesota would have helped put solar panels on the roofs of thousands of Minnesotans, ending their reliance on fossil fuels and slashing their monthly energy bills from that day on. These programs put money back in Minnesotans' bank accounts by dozens or hundreds of dollars a month, which is real, significant stability for these families' budgets. Like we've heard throughout this fall with SNAP food benefits and cuts to Medicaid, and just over the last 2 weeks, the cut to the Continuum of Care program, which provides $48 million a year in permanent supportive housing for Minnesotans' most vulnerable folks. This is where Donald Trump and the Republicans in Congress go looking for budget cuts, taking from the bottom to give to the top, from the poor to the rich, cutting essential services from people just getting by to pay for tax cuts for the wealthy and tens of billions of dollars in subsidies for the fossil fuel industry. I will say I have a teenager and a preteen, and they have friends whose parents are all across the political spectrum. And for none of these kids is climate change like a debatable topic. It is just a reality that they know that they are going to have to live with for the rest of their lives. And they see the adults in the room, the leaders of our country, telling them that they don't care about that. They don't care about their future. I really hope that we can see some of these projects restored, either in court or by Congress. Our effort to reach the 100% plan by 2040 goal depends on it. Our kids are depending on it. And so does the ability for many Minnesotans to pay their next bill. I want to thank everyone for coming to this hearing on energy. And we are adjourned.